the presentations that I've seen already today, I think it's really, really interesting, encouraging, slightly frightening to see how many of the examples that have been given have been based around media that's on the Transport for London network. Sometimes even we at TfL forget how big and imposing and important TfL is, not just to Londoners in their day-to-day lives, but also to the city itself, and therefore also to the country itself, and also certainly to this industry, to the out-of-home industry in particular. So there's a few things that I am hoping to cover. That is some of them, I guess. We have heard a lot today about delivering audiences, great experiences, and targeting the millions of people that out of home can do at scale. But I'd like to start by asking you all a question. And that is, are you and your organizations really all about delivering audiences? Or are you deep down still just flogging the asset, the format, the screen? Because I think that irrespective of the talk, the digital out-of-home industry is still obsessed with the product rather than the benefit. And I ask the question because, if I'm honest, we at Transport for London have really only ever been about the screen, about the poster, about the billboard. And with the title of my talk being Why Every Journey Matters, I think it's beholden on me to be honest about why talking about the assets is no longer just relevant, and why I want Transport for London to be among the first truly influential organisations to practice what we preach and talk about audience first, second and third in everything that we do from now on. Let me also be clear that when I say that we've been guilty of concentrating on assets rather than the audience at TfL, I'm not being derogatory towards any of our media partners. One of the main reasons that I believe that we are in the pickle that we are over this is because of the way that TfL has done business, rather than any particular strategic approach or lack of one from any of our partners. Maybe you don't agree with my premise that this is still an issue at all, that the audience is front and centre of everything we do. In that case, why are we here today at the digital out-of-home conference, only talking about digital? Why is there still a distinction between out-of-home and digital out-of-home? Taking it a step further, we should be arguing that the term out-of-home is now out of date. I mean, I would love to believe that this time next year or soon after, we can be here having a debate about how our industry is successfully crossing the boundaries between today's traditional, mobile, digital, social, online media by being able to communicate with audiences in exciting, emotionally involving and interesting ways. Sean Gregory said this morning that he thought we should be calling ourselves consumer engagement brands. And I think, although we need to work on that title, I think that is a valid point. So hopefully over the next few minutes, I'll be able to touch on how I think Transport for London are hoping to set out on that path. And we might be able to put Adrian out of a job as well, actually, at the same time. First, I'll remind you about who TfL is. I know you all know a lot about our organisation, and I know you all regularly use the network in one form or another. But I think it's also worth reminding everybody of the scale and breadth of the network and how important it is to the continued success of London, as I touched on, and the businesses within it. No other city on earth is as defined by its transport system as London. It's instantly recognised the world over, and it's ever present throughout the city. London thrives for many reasons, but none more so than because of the efficiency, don't laugh, it's true, and extent of our network. It runs day and night, above and below ground. Our capital's ability to fulfil its ambition is wholly dependent on our ability to support its growth and keep pace with the city as it expands in size, in population, and global influence. And I think the quote, this is my favourite quote, possibly ever, from the mayor of Bogota from a while ago, but saying a developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, it's where the rich use public transportation. And I think it says a lot about London, it says a lot about our network, and I think it says a lot about what we're trying to continue to achieve as a transport network. TfL has always been an innovative organisation. Some of you may raise an eyebrow at that statement, but let me give you some statistics. I'm sure you do already know that London introduced the first underground train system in the world 151 years ago. nearly 152 now. It's interesting to think that people use the Underground to go and see the last public hanging in London, which is quite a bizarre thought. But did you also know that TfL now accounts for 1 in 7 of all contactless payment transactions? That has grown dramatically since September last year when we introduced contactless payment on the Tube network. And in fact, getting to that number, we've caused the fastest uptake of contactless transactions by its customers of any organisation in Europe. A lot talked about social media. We've got 1.8 million, more than 1.8 million social media followers, and our open data policy has enabled more than 350 transport-related apps to be out there for you to use. We've got over 8 million visitors to our website every month, and we've got Wi-Fi at 190 tube stations, and we're improving and innovating our retail offer across the network. Now, at the moment, we've got about 1,000 retail units across the London Underground network. We're not really known for our retail. That's because they're all very small. The average size is about 200 square feet. But they are going to improve. And this is all, I think this is quite interesting. This is about how, this is a good illustration of how TfL are continuing to innovate in more than the obvious ways. This is what a retail unit looked like less than a year ago, well, just over a year ago at Old Street. I'll just let you look at that for another second. That's the same space. Not today, because this is a pop-up store. And we have introduced across our network, but specifically at Old Street, where we did it first and best, I would argue, by changing clearly and totally the whole proposition of what our consumers, our customers, need and expect and demand of a transport network in the 21st century. And that, I think, is quite a nice example of, and just a small scale, how TfL is hoping to change. So, some more numbers. At the moment, TfL is responsible for, count them, 30 million journeys every day. That's thankfully mostly due to the road network, the TLRN, the red routes, as most Londoners know them by. So that's 4 billion road journeys on the red route network every year. That's 2.5 billion bus journeys every year. And nearly 1.5 billion tube journeys every year. So even the London Overground carries more people each year than Heathrow and Gatwick put together. And London's population continues to grow. It's growing rapidly, from 8.6 million people today in central London, or in London itself, which is the biggest it's ever been, to about 9 million by 2019, 10 million by 2030, and more than 11 million by 2050. And that rate of growth is equivalent to 1 tube train full of people every 3 days arriving in London, or 2 full buses a day. And the future of this mega region will be influenced like no other by the growing, diverse, young, cosmopolitan, and wealthy demographic. Their approach to media, their favourite brands, and their surroundings are more sophisticated than ever before, and we have the opportunity to exceed their expectations. So that growth, not only does it give us huge logistical issues to deal with, but it reinforces the fact that London is, I believe, the world's greatest big city. London is Europe's #1 location for financial, business, and creative services. Since 2003, it has attracted 3 times more global headquarters than any other city. It's a living, breathing, growing colossus, a truly global city. And the influence is growing further still. The global leadership stretches across multiple sectors, as we've said, from the creative economy to medical tech clusters, from world-class universities to international finance. It's a leading knowledge and economic centre that attracts the world's talent seeking to make their mark. Our audience is unrivaled, and it's only going to get bigger. London inspires the imagination and ambition of everyone who lives, works, and visits here. So much hyperbole, but I think it's actually well-founded. And that's why I believe that we should put that audience at the front and centre of everything we do, not just as Transport for London, but certainly as the out-of-home industry. And if we can talk the talk, as they say, can we walk the walk? Well, time will tell. But maybe I can show a quick video to set the scene. And this is for all of you here who are interested in why I think most of you are here, to be honest, is about what we are hoping to do with our new rail contract in the forthcoming months.
London. We're proud to be at the heart of it. Keeping it connected, keeping it moving. And we know that we have to keep moving with it. Imagine a future more adaptable, more innovative, more able to react and grow with you and our audience. And what an audience that is. The London audience demand more. Brands expect more. We want to drive a change in the way cities do out-of-home advertising, and we know that we have the platform and expertise to make that happen. We've improved the service. More capacity, new trains, better access. But our ambition doesn't stop there. By continuing to invest in both infrastructure and customer experience, we will ensure that we're capable of meeting the ever-changing demands of the world's best big city. We're introducing a new commercial media partnership that will open up new possibilities. A partnership more complete, ready, efficient, collaborative, connected. Lead the evolution with us. Demand a better future.
Well, our main rail contracts are up for renewal in September next year. The Underground, Overground, DLR, Tramlink and Crossrail when it comes on board. So that's over 1.5 billion passenger journeys every year. 450 odd stations, and again, a fantastic audience. But the status quo will no longer adequately serve them, I believe. I firmly believe that in order to take advantage of the whole opportunity that our estate gives us and that our commercial potential gives us, we need to embrace a new way of working. Advertising at TfL, and certainly at TfL, if not everywhere, can no longer just be about posters on walls and whether they're digitally delivered or not. This has to be about having a broader dialogue with our customers right across their daily journey, exploiting the various touch points where they encounter us and bringing more than just nicely delivered fortnightly campaigns. I believe it would be unrealistic, though, and probably unfair of us to expect an out-of-home company to be able to exceed in that task on their own, no matter how professional and established they are, which is why I've been approaching this new contract in a different way. As you all know well, and some in this room know better than others, the current and recent way of doing things has been very successful in monetary terms for TfL, less so for some of our partners. We appreciate that the old model of basing a relationship on a large guaranteed revenue stream has its limitations, not least in the way it limits innovation and risk-taking due to having to keep one's eye on a cheque being written every quarter. So we plan to move away from that to a situation where, if we work in a far more collaborative manner, where our objectives and motivations are aligned, where the risks and rewards are shared more evenly, then we can deliver a better advertising landscape through which to target that audience and deliver real value in return for our advertisers. Our environments are incredibly complex and difficult places in which to develop new advertising technologies. Our infrastructure is very old in some places. Our ability even to deliver sufficient power to drive digital screens in some of our locations is stretched. Our fire regulations mean that in underground stations, LCD, LED, and even projection delivery are complicated and very difficult. The heat generated by digital equipment is an issue. The dust produced by the train brakes increases the maintenance and cleaning regimes. The close proximity of the people to the advertising screens themselves means that brightness and picture quality issues are constantly challenging. Access to these locations for posting and maintaining sites is logistically complex. All of these things add to the cost and complexity of doing business. And remember, by including Overground, DLR, Tramlink and Crossrail this time round, we'll have 450 stations to worry about. So even though most of those stations don't have the logistical complications of the Underground, the capital investment needed is still going to be chunky. Which again is why we want to move to a more collaborative approach. Let TfL take some of the strain in terms of delivery and capital investment. Why wouldn't we invest our own time and resource into one of the biggest media contracts that there is? Because, like it or not, with approaching a fifth of the UK's out-of-home advertising market, TfL is an advertising business. Now, don't get me wrong, the majority of our revenue will continue to be delivered via good old classic posters. There's nothing better than a cross-track 48 sheet in Zone 1. But to progress, to deliver real flexibility and significant advertising at scale, we need to think differently. I don't know what the solution is to delivering that vision, but I hope some of you in the room today do have some ideas about how we can deliver that. And at risk of a deluge, I'd encourage you to get in touch to help us all in our thinking. As an industry, we need to think more cleverly about how we combine the impact of a beautifully crafted and delivered outdoor campaign with the mobile and digital opportunities that each of us carries in our pockets every day. As an industry, we need to be clear on the value that we add to a multimedia campaign in terms of return on investment. Even without the influence and distraction of the mobile industry, I believe one other area where we as an organisation need to up our game, and we've talked about it today already, is the effective use of insights gathered through data. As our network gains capacity and our infrastructure builds, passenger behaviour will only get more complex. The result is that targeting consumers effectively will get harder. The consolidation of our rail transport modes into one media contract begins to address that issue, as brands should be able to more accurately track passenger impressions across the whole of the network, rather than using a series of different transport modes as proxies for demographics. And I think this will be a vital component in the overall success or otherwise of this advertising contract. Because the media world is evolving at an ever faster rate, and we need to ensure that we are not left behind with the less tangible elements of advertising. And what I mean by that is that we have to have effective data so that we don't find ourselves as TfL in a reactive position when it comes to justifying premium rates or holding value in an ever more commoditized digital out-of-home world. And that's not even starting to think about programmatic buying. Again, fascinating presentation earlier today. Because if we can't demonstrate effectiveness for brands and their agencies, it doesn't matter what the poster looks like, to be frank, whether it's digital or paper and paste. You know, and as Andreas mentioned earlier, this is going to happen. The programmatic development, the fact that data is going to be used and used cleverly and well by parts of the industry means that there are going to be winners and therefore there are going to be losers. And that makes it equally exciting and terrifying for me, to be perfectly frank. But, having said all that, Amara's Law, as Bill Gates made famous, really has come to life in our world. And we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the changes that will occur in the next 10 years. We don't know what the future will bring, but we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner where we can't act and react to changes in the marketplace. And arguably our current arrangements don't allow us to do this. And that, I would say, has been to the detriment of our estate today. So for all of those reasons, we at TfL appreciate we need to take more of a partnership approach. I'd like to move on, if I may, to our surface transport network. And where we've seen the impact of digital out of home. As most of you know, we have a fantastic portfolio of large format digital panels, not least the recent development at Old Street, which is currently being dominated by Google. And because we're a landlord rather than a sales house, or a media owner rather, the addition of more and more digital panels to our estate has hitherto meant more revenue for TfL. That's all very well and good. What it hasn't done, however, I think, and maybe a bit of an elephant in the room today, is increase the overall share of money spent on out-of-home, at least not significantly. There's still too much cannibalization of other out-of-home spending. It's all fine for the people who are just in the digital world, because clearly that is taking an ever greater share of the out-of-home cake. But there is still definitely room for classic advertising. And when you have an estate the size of TfL's, which is both digital and non-digital, I don't get terribly excited by more money going onto the digital estate if it's coming off my non-digital estate. Especially if the margin that I'm going to be getting on the digital estate is potentially less because of the capex that's had to be put into that estate. I think we're coming to the stage, in London at least, where we are getting to the point where diminishing returns are coming into play. We always knew it would happen, and there's still somewhere to go. There's still some way to go before we're at saturation point, but it is a land grab. And if I'm honest, we've played our part in that, because if we hadn't done it, somebody else would have. And at least the cash that TfL receives goes back into improving the transport network. And we can see that through the development of high-quality digital advertising infrastructure popping up in many other cities in the UK, sales companies have to do this to diversify their portfolio. I'm sure Tim has probably bought another couple of regional companies since lunchtime. But the more and more that sales companies diversify the portfolio, the more landlords have to sweat their assets and gain secondary revenues. That just means the more that agencies or clients are spreading their budgets ever more thinly across them. And again, if we were to grow the industry, Sarah's presentation earlier, it was just absolutely nailed it, I think. We need to do more as an industry to grow the industry, not just digital, not just moving the bits of cash around the assets that we currently have. But my concern is that we are, as an industry, happily continuing down that path. And just putting in more new and shiny panels in the ground is not going to be the answer, because we don't really know what the outcome is going to be in the long term. Commoditizing our estates will only ever end badly for the industry. And by that I mean the whole industry, again, not just digital out of home. So to reiterate, I mean that there's a bigger problem because we're just talking about how digital per se is the answer, rather than adding value to advertisers through mass delivery of high value audiences. And being able to prove that, I think, is the next major thing that we need to do. That's not to say that we shouldn't continue to invest in improving our advertising estates. And just so that I can completely contradict myself and go against everything I've just said, but hey, what the hell. I'm also going to take this opportunity to mention our newest roadside development for large format digital panels, the London landscape. So just last week we announced the forthcoming opportunity to tender for 25 new large format landscape panels that oversail the TLRN way. That's 13 locations, all on prime routes into and out of London, reaching 46 million impacts every 2 weeks. So maybe I'm not really contradicting myself. It is, I believe, still about the audience, quickly and efficiently. And I wait with bated breath the responses from the market. Just to labour the point, though, a good example of where I believe digital out of home will not just demonstrate but also deliver its potential is in small formats. I think carefully I can point to our bus shelter estate, because we're still in a tender situation there in all uses of the word. Where over recent years the introduction of digital panels has again allowed the demonstration of great creativity, but also flexibility. And I believe that this format will probably have the best chance of quickly delivering the advantages of digital out of home, even better than large format, because I think it can be easily delivered at scale in one format to mass audiences, and certainly that's the case in London. I'm not giving anything away here, but I can safely say that there will be more digital panels on our bus shelter estate in the future. And it's not just because they're digital that they will reap dividends. It's because they will deliver in a more creatively, more flexibly, and perhaps even more interactively method a valuable audience, again, at scale, and the London audience at that. And it's been mentioned more than once today, the Google example, which I think is fantastic, and also the Walker's crisps example. Quite interesting that took place, I think I'm right in saying, in only 2 shelters in our estate. And the amount of coverage that it got was phenomenal. So, but is that out of home doing its job? Is that digital out of home doing its job? One might argue, yes, it is, because the coverage that it got via Twitter, via YouTube, was phenomenal. And I get the feeling that they were making more money out of that than we are. But, we need to sort these kinds of things out. The other point I would say about that is the biggest response I received from the Walker's campaign was when I had to answer a mayoral question about why TfL were encouraging obesity by giving out free crisps. It's true. Unbelievable. The joys of working with TfL. Nearly 10 years after having introduced digital technology to the London Underground estate, the digital out-of-home market is nowhere near as advanced as it should be. I believe that we are only now coming to a turning point or a tipping point in the evolution of digital out-of-home in the UK, where we may see a step change in the way that it's bought and sold. And I believe that the road ahead isn't going to be easy to navigate. Some of my concerns I have mentioned, so commoditization, others like programmatic buying and data development, and maybe more for another time. But they should be discussed, and they should be discussed soon. So why is it, for example, that the industry share is still at best static? Why are the majority of campaigns, even digital panels, still bought on the old 2-weekly cycle? On the flip side, how do we develop sites that deliver what advertisers want, as well as giving value to landlords, and that can be delivered without upsetting residents, citizens, and their elected representatives in borough councils, which is not an insignificant issue? I think that the out-of-home industry, not just the digital out-of-home industry, needs to be more inclusive and widen the debate. I believe that landlords should, certainly key ones like Transport for London and maybe Network Rail and some of the airports, they should have a place at the table and add their experience and knowledge to the debate. The supply chain, which this is meant to represent, is quite complex, and each party's relationship within it is complex. But quite often it's about metrics that don't add value to the customer or to the advertiser at times. So we won't explain that one any further. You can make it up, you'll work it out, you're clever people. But remember, as more and more capital expenditure has to be invested into the industry, it is, I would suggest, it's all coming directly or indirectly from the landlords, either in cash terms or in a reduced share of net revenues. So don't shy away from the fact that there are more people of influence in the future of this industry than just the media owners or the buying market or indeed the manufacturers. I would say that the landlords have value to add, and without us, you've got nothing to sell. A long quote from Sir Peter. I've always got to have a quote from Sir Peter if I want to keep my job. Fundamentally, we all win if we work hard and deliver what the market demands. And to get back to my first point, I believe that to do that, we have to go back to basics and think about the audience. And from a TfL perspective, that is why I say that every journey matters. Thank you very much.